brilliant ideas, powered by Hyundai Motor.
Raised in exile during the Cultural Revolution, Ai Weiwei is a man driven by his conscience. An artist as much as he is an activist. He uses sculpture, installation, film, and even social media to speak about issues surrounding truth, justice, and human rights.
Ai Weiwei is very important in terms of what he represents as a person who stands up for ideas. If we look through the history of art, the greatest artworks talk more about the human condition in the face of different situations, and that's what Weiwei's works do.
Ai Weiwei 不仅仅是一个艺术家，或者说他更多的是通过这样一种艺术的方式来表达他的想法和他的追求。
He's placed himself at the center of global events, and he's exhibited in some of the world's most prestigious venues. He is one of the most prolific and provocative artists of our time.
I do think he is a skilled and sophisticated producer of objects and happenings. Who knows where the story ends, really?
Maybe he's also an attention seeker. Yeah. But he deals with themes that are quite universal, things like human rights, the government. These resonate with people not just in China, but across the world.
As an artist, my role in society is to express myself, to share my sensitivities. If I have the position and refuse to do so, doesn't matter being called artist or whatever. It's just a mental corruption.
Athens, Greece. Ai Weiwei is here for a solo exhibition at the Cycladic Museum dedicated to Greece's ancient cultures. And like every public appearance he makes, it's a media frenzy. The exhibition features a handful of familiar works made with his signature use of wood, marble, and traditional objects, as well as traditional techniques, like these polyhedrons constructed using the joinery methods of the Ming dynasty.
Ai Weiwei's art's very interesting because, in a way, it's extremely classical. From its technical proficiency, from the forms, the materials he works with, the wood, the porcelain, the installations. It's very, very modernist in its values.
And inspired by the museum's celebrated collection of ancient Cycladic art are some new pieces, such as this crowd pleaser, a cheeky Cycladic rendition of Ai Weiwei's infamous dropping a Han Dynasty urn from 1995.
Ai Weiwei was brought up by a generation under a government that suggested it would be good to destroy these things because they represented an old society that New China wanted to leave behind. The fact that he does it, of course, is showing how ridiculous it was to want to destroy all of these things. But he reforms it in a way that actually gives the work new meaning.
Time and again, you see him coming back to these things that are so specifically and so kind of wonderfully Chinese, you know, ceramics, carpentry, different forms of sculpture, that he's able to kind of twist and play on in other ways. It's an interesting metaphor for kind of how he sees China.
But in amongst the light-hearted works are some darker exhibits. Marble lifebuoys and used gas canisters collected from the Macedonian border. Direct references to Europe's ongoing refugee crisis. The location of the exhibition is no coincidence. Since early 2016, Ai Weiwei has been actively involved in the crisis, campaigning and filming hundreds of hours of interviews with refugees in Greece and all over the world.
Each day we will see dozens of boats coming, and the same kind of story is always very sad. So that got me involved emotionally. Then gradually it became deeper because I want to do a documentary film. So that made me went to over 20, 30 camps.
He's even moved his studio to the front lines on the Greek island of Lesbos.
People always ask me why you're interested in refugee situation. And if I think back, I'm a refugee.
Ai Weiwei was born in 1957. His father was Ai Qing, a respected artist and poet who, like many other intellectuals of the time, was denounced as an enemy of the Communist Party. Ai Weiwei grew up in labor camps with his father and lived in exile in the harsher climes of northern China until the death of Chairman Mao allowed him to return to Beijing in 1976.
Growing up in the Cultural Revolution was very strong impact on me being an artist. My father, he has to clean the public toilet and, most hateful work, even for villagers. So everyday life is have to dealing with this kind of discrimination or being pushed away or being described as another kind of human being. And when I see those people, I immediately have curiosity to see what's it like.
我个人觉得，就是艾薇薇呢是一个特别敏感的人。那么艾薇薇呢，作为一个艺术家，她身体力行的来质疑、批判，而且敢于发声。
Freedom of speech, human rights, relate to my early struggle or my family's or the whole generation's struggle in fighting for those basic rights. So it made me understand how important an individual artist, how strong their voice can be, and how necessary or important those voices are.
For as long as the world has known of Ai Weiwei, his commitment to human rights has never wavered. Almost 10 years ago, he responded the same way to the Sichuan earthquake in China, using his art and his influence to speak about the disaster.
Over 70,000 people lost their life, which is quite shocking. So I become very active online in questioning about the structure of the buildings. It shouldn't have such a big casualty. And especially when I learned there's thousands of students disappeared under this kind of state-built schools. So we start to make an investigation.
Using his online influence, Ai Weiwei collected over 5,000 names of the schoolchildren that perished in the earthquake, names that the authorities had tried to conceal. In 2009, he created an emotional tribute to the children, covering the facade of the Haus der Kunst in Munich with 9,000 backpacks. The authorities did not react kindly. That same year, he was beaten by the Chinese police for attempting to testify in the investigation.
The authority strongly reacted to it. The internet offered a possibility for people to communicate and to express themselves and share information, which shakes the foundation of the totalitarian society.
Never bending in his opposition, in 2011, after years of political agitation, he was finally arrested and was detained for 81 days. His passport was seized and he couldn't leave the country for 4 years. Waves of protests were held in his name. Around the world, Ai Weiwei became an icon.
This is when you can see the impact that he has amongst the people who feel that he was standing up for injustices. You know, if he didn't care about China, he wouldn't stand up for these issues. So it's something he cares very much about, which is why he's willing to put himself on the line, as it were.
A friend of mine told me, well, you have to be very careful. Now they call you activist, which is not a favorite name for artists. I told him, I don't care. I don't care whatever they call me. I do whatever I think I should do and I like to do, and I think that's who I am.
Coming up, we meet Ai Weiwei as a young artist in New York and retrace his remarkable ascent to being an art world superstar. Despite being better known as an activist, Ai Weiwei has first and always been an artist. In 1981, frustrated by the censorship in his country, a 24-year-old Ai Weiwei left China for New York City in search of greater freedoms to pursue art.
I love New York. So I still remember how I feel that moment. Suddenly you see a whole city with such energy and expression. As a young man, you're completely shocked.
Even though he never completed art school in New York, his time in the city introduced him to new ideas that would have a profound impact on his artistic sensibilities.
He has a number of influences, but probably the biggest among them would be Duchamp, Beuys, and Warhol. And he took different things from each of them, but from Warhol, the idea that kind of when one is an artist, everything one does is part of one's artistic, not just persona, but artistic practice.
In the 1980s, he had his first and only exhibition in New York called Old Shoes, Safe Sex. Echoing Marcel Duchamp in his use of found objects, it was Ai Weiwei's response to the panic surrounding AIDS at the time.
He had one exhibition in like 1985-86, which was the very Duchampian works. And, I think that it was really for him a process of absorbing influences and of looking at life. And this is also very much shown in the photography work that he did when he was there.
But apart from that one exhibition, Ai Weiwei didn't do very much in New York, right up to the day he returned to China in 1993 when his father was ill.
I think for him that was a tough period because, he says he came back without a degree, a reputation, or even a wife to show for his time abroad, right? And, he's living with his mom again, and his father was on his deathbed, and it was I think it was quite a low period for him.
就我感觉，就是艾薇薇虽然好像在这个所谓的展览上啊，或者说艺术活动上啊，好像不是很多，但是呢，我觉得他的思考，他的观察，其实一直没有停顿。那么93年回来之后，那么一旦在中国这个现实土壤当中遇到了他能够发挥作用、发挥潜能的这样一个机会，所以他一下就变得势不可挡。
In China, Ai Weiwei became a driving force in the burgeoning avant-garde circle. He pushed against censorship, bringing the global discussion about contemporary art home through a series of underground magazines. His rebellion culminated in a landmark exhibition in Shanghai in 2000. It featured some of the most provocative works from 46 local artists, including his own infamous Study of Perspective series.
If we look back, it's a very important show because it has all the works not being censored, which some are very critical works. Until today, I don't think the show like this can happen.
By the late 2000s, Ai Weiwei had become a major player in the international art world, exhibiting at some of the most prestigious venues in the world. Even in the 4 years where he couldn't leave China, Ai Weiwei continued to be one of the world's most exhibited artists, every year showing an average of at least 10 solos outside China.
Within art circles, Ai Weiwei was certainly, a renowned artist before his detention. But I think, certainly for the common person, his detention and arrest by the Chinese government has made him, a real symbol, And this is unintended probably by anyone. Maybe he's also an attention seeker, yeah. But he deals with themes that are quite universal, things like human rights, the government, the role of tradition within contemporary China. These resonate with people not just in China, but across the world.
After the break, we visit Ai Weiwei's first ever solo exhibition in China. Artist and activist Ai Weiwei has had dozens of solo exhibitions worldwide, but he's never had one in his own country, China, until 2015. While still banned from leaving China, he decided to try his luck and organised his first solo exhibition in Beijing.
China is a heavily censored society, but they never say, we cannot have an art show. So I contacted two galleries. These two galleries are very brave. They said, yes, we like to have your show for a long time.
Spread over 2 galleries in Beijing's 798 art district, the exhibition consisted of his classic reinterpretation of Chinese tradition. From his collection of broken ceramic spouts to his dipping of old wooden artifacts in bright paint. And in the very center of it all is an ancient temple from the late Ming dynasty that Ai Weiwei lovingly salvaged and rebuilt within the gallery's walls.
I think it's a pretty interesting work. People have argued that the doubling is a sense of a mirror of how we look at tradition. There's actually many levels to this work. One level is like just the sheer displacements, bringing it in, rebuilding it, and then with parts that he added on, he makes little comments, he puts, particular sneaker. He fits in certain parts that were missing with his own parts that he created. So he brings in all these ideas. And perhaps, I think that's what good art can do.
That show is very special because that's literally my first show, and also at the moment I was detained, and a lot of young people are eager to see what Ai Weiwei is going to put up. And that show was so tremendously popular because people feel, this is crazy, Ai Weiwei can have his show here.
It's peculiar, but it's beautiful and special, I think. As a Chinese who exhibits for the first time in China after so many years, it's good to see something else from him that is not provocative. I knew what he did, the artist that wanted to contest the Chinese government. It's a nice change because it really shows that there is something else in him that really shines.
Soon enough, other galleries came knocking.
At that moment, people realized that I can do exhibitions. So within about a month, I had 4 or 5 shows. And everybody was shocked.
But a bigger shock came shortly after. After 4 years under China's travel ban, Ai Weiwei got his passport back.
The police said, what's your next show? Can you always pre-announce to us? I said, okay. That's the moment they give back my passport.
Some have speculated that he got his passport returned because he chose to do shows that were far less political than his usual output.
I think there was a period where he believed in no compromise, no matter what sort of damage that would bring to him. And I mean, I think people thought he could have gotten his passport back years ago if he'd simply written a letter saying he needed to seek medical treatment abroad. But he wasn't willing to do that because he would see having the passport as a basic human right, which it is. So I think a lot of us were a little bit surprised to see him, able to show in Beijing suddenly, and not just in one gallery, but in 4 or 5. And then B, to do a show that's basically devoid of political content. I mean, there's always a little bit of politics, but certainly compared with all kinds of other work he's been doing lately. This is a show that doesn't press those buttons in the same way. But he made that decision. I don't think it's to be condemned, and it's a really good show.
From a political point of view, the police will never say it's political. You know, the political can be very hidden, but still it's very political work. And I'm very happy I made it through all those struggles, and I never really trying to settle for less. I really put a strong work. And especially when you can show in your so-called hometown, with many people already ready to look at it.
In September 2015, with his new passport, he returned to London to open a major retrospective at the Royal Academy, the first of his international exhibitions that he was able to attend in person in 4 years. The retrospective featured some of his most iconic pieces and some of his most controversial, including another haunting piece about the Sichuan earthquake, altogether bringing his journey as an artist and a champion of human rights full circle.
艾薇薇搜集了上百吨的汶川地震之后废墟的那些钢筋，这种量又非常大，他把这些作品这些钢筋全部拉直，完了呢铺在地上。他不是把这种现成品直接拿到展厅去展览。汶川这个地震这个事件虽然是一个自然灾害，但是它背后还牵扯到很多问题，社会问题。那么这个呢，艾薇薇呢非常敏锐地感觉到，或者说把它作为一个主要的素材。
People think that all artists today in the contemporary world should be political in some ways. But I think that Weiwei is a good example, because what he recognizes is that actually political situation today can change tomorrow. And if your art is only reacting against a political situation today, then you have a very limited lifespan, and it becomes another form of ideology. If we look through the history of art, you know, the greatest artworks, they talk more about the human condition in the face of different situations, and that's what Weiwei's works do.
There is still the question of him as an artist, and I still do believe that the works back up the position. I do think he is a skilled and sophisticated producer of objects and happenings. Who knows where the story ends, really? But I think it's a mistake to completely write off his artistic persona or his artistic output, because he is also so much better known now as a sort of activist figure.
Who becomes famous in contemporary art is not entirely predictable, you know. Maybe it's partly luck, but I do think he is a great artist, actually.
As an artist, my role in society is to express myself and to share my sensitivities and to communicate with people. So if I can do so, I would think I'm a very lucky one. But if I do have the position and refuse to do so, I would think I'm totally corrupted. Doesn't matter being called artist or whatever, it's just a mental corruption. I have no other choice. As an artist, the situation changes me. And I'm always learn and ready to be involved.
Brilliant ideas, powered by Hyundai Motor.